Hey guys, this is Ed from Mission Impossible. Welcome back to my Atari 8-bit assembly language tutorial series. Today we're going to be taking the playfield and moving it over to the left-hand side. We're going to be making some room for our UI and borders and stuff like that, but first we need to get this playfield moved over. We're going to be taking a look at the display list and modifying it, so we're going to have Antic Mode 4 and Antic Mode 5. So let's get into it. First thing we're going to want to do here is set up a couple variables for the playfield height and width. Okay, so I'm just gonna go ahead and create playfield width, and it's gonna be 11 by 11. And it's, you know, our playfield now, because it's a circle, it actually fits nicely within an 11 by 11 playfield. So this is actually gonna look really good. So we have 11 by 11, and what else do we need to do? So I'm going to try to do this in order that makes sense. There's a lot of changes that we have to make. I resisted the urge to do a whole lot of optimization while I was doing this, and you know, I had worked on it a bunch and then came to the realization that I'm just going to confuse people with this. So I'm going to keep it simple, and then we'll go back and do more optimization. So the first thing we're going to need to do is we're going to need to deal with this map offset function. It's dealing with the screen height and the screen width, and we actually want to be dealing with the playfield height and width. So I'm going to do playfield and playfield. That's going to shift our map accordingly. Okay, so we're going to look at the blitz screen function here. In here, we have it coming down 2 lines. We're actually going to want to only do 1. And the reason is because we're going to have the top line going to be, the top line is going to be a border. So we actually only want to have 1 line here. And I'm actually going to rewrite this a little bit. And actually, and the reason why is because, you know, we have it very specifically in the center of the screen. We want to make this a little bit more generic, I guess, and we're going to want to tweak this a bit. I looked at the blitz circle line here, and we're doing a lot of math here that we're not going to need to do, and it just makes things a lot more complex because this is expecting it to go into the center of the screen. So we don't want to do this. So we're going to get rid of these lines here. And so what we're going to want to do is we're actually going to want to create a couple of temp variables. And the reason why is because we're not going to want to modify the map pointer and the screen pointer, because we're going to want to have them be in a specific place every time. So when we go to the next line, we know exactly where it's going to be. The way the function was before, it added more space to the pointers to get it to the next line. The problem here is that we're needing to change all that of where that's going to be. So this is going to be a lot simpler once I show you what we're doing here. So I'm going to create a couple temp variables for addresses. Okay, so I'm going to call it temp adder 1, and I'm going to just skip 9F just because it's weird to go across that boundary there. So I'm going to put A0 and temp adder 1 or 2. I'm going to put that at A2. Okay. And remember that these need 2 addresses. So A0 and A1 are going to be for temp adder 1, and A2 and A3 are going to be for temp adder 2. So let's go back down to our function here. And we're actually going to copy the map pointer and the screen pointer to these temp variables. And then when we're done, we'll just copy them back. Okay. So I'm going to do a MWA to move with move word. So we're going to do map pointer, and we're going to do the temp adder 1, and we're going to do MWA screen pointer temp adder 2. And all this looks fine, but instead of doing all that math that we had there, all we're going to need to do here is copy this stuff back. So this way we know exactly where the pointers are after this function runs. So this would be, I can't say that there's no side effects, but there's no side effect of moving the map pointer and the screen pointer. And that's very important when we're going through these lines. So we're gonna go through on Blitz screen, we're gonna go through each individual line. So the top line is gonna be blank. So I'm gonna just go ahead and do line number 1, blank. We're gonna add one line, so to the screen pointer. And we're gonna do screen character width, which is the 40 characters, 40 bytes. And we're gonna do on the map pointer, we're gonna add one map width, which is gonna be just map width. And so that's actually the first line, which is gonna be blank. Okay, so we don't wanna start on the top line. We wanna move one line down. So that's what we're doing here. So I'm gonna do a blitz circle line. And we're gonna do 5, but it's still gonna be 5 wide. And then we're gonna move over 3 in the map and 7 on the screen. Now, what we had before was 7 and 14. Now that's because we had the screen, everything in the middle. So now what we're gonna have is we want it to be, have one gap on the left side of the playfield, and then we wanna start this line in the center of our new playfield location. So also notice that we have an odd number here. We have a 7 instead of what we probably would think would be 6 or 8. And the reason why is because on the left-hand side, we want to put a border that's going to be 1 character wide, half of a tile. Okay, so that's why eventually we're going to get down to when it's in the center of the circle, it's going to be only over 1 space, and you'll see what I'm talking about in just a second. So we're going to do line 2. We're going to do this same thing over and over again. So on here, the next line is going to be 2 more characters wide, and it's the same thing we had down here. So I don't know if you can see it, but the same thing we had in this block, we're going to have the first numbers are going to be the same because it's the same width for the circle. Now the offsets are going to be different. So now this one is going to move over on the map. So this right here, this line here where we say go up map width, so that's going to move 1 line down. Well, the deal is we don't want to offset of 3 now, we want to offset of 2. And the same thing goes with the screen. So we have 7 up here and then 5 here. So we're gonna keep reducing on the leading up part to the center. So I'm gonna just go ahead and copy and paste. And then this one is going to be 9 and 1 and 3. Okay, and let's do this. Okay, so line 4 is where it's going to be the exact same as the one before it. So we can actually just do line 4, line 5, line 6, etc. And all the way up to lines, all the way up to line 7, it's going to be the same. So let's see what we got here. 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So all these lines are the same. We could potentially put this in a loop. The problem that when you deal with the loop is the fact that this is a macro up here, and the problem here is that we're using X, and then we could use Y and we could loop it 3 times or 5 times or whatever. That'd be okay maybe, but we'll just leave it like that for now. And so after that, we're gonna do the start reducing in the width. We're gonna go line 8 and then line 9. So we have 11 lines in our playfield, and the top and bottom are going to be blank, and the left and right are going to be blank. So, so there is all we need for that. So I'm actually going to remove all this. Now, if you remember, last time we set up these left tile, up tile, and all that stuff, and we're gonna have to do that in a different function. The way I did it here was not ideal. Had to do some math to remove it because we kept modifying the map pointer and the screen pointer. And so we don't want that anymore. So let's see here. So let's actually put line 9 and let's go ahead and remove all this. And let's fix up the comments a little bit. So line 8, line 9, and then line 1, we're just going to say, not going to worry about that blank because it is skipping that top line. Okay. So let's try this out. Okay. So it kind of worked, but there's an issue. Now, it wasn't readily apparent to me what the issue was, but after working with it a bit, I figured it out pretty soon. And if you look here, we get to this one spot where the fountain is, and then we shift over to here on the screen size. So it moves, and the way I found that out is I looked at it with the debugger and found that when we're doing our math on the screen pointer, it goes over a low byte boundary. Basically, when you're adding numbers, when you're dealing with the 16-bit number, if you are, you add mostly to the low byte, right? But if the low byte is already at FF, what's going to happen is when you add 1 to that, all it's going to do is flip over to 0. And it's going to ignore anything else that is there. So basically it reset at that point. And that's not what we want. And what it had to do with is there was a bug in our, in this blit tile function, okay? And the bug is right here. And the deal is that screen pointer is a 16-bit address, right? And we're only dealing with this low byte. And so when we increment on certain boundaries, what's going to happen is that if you don't increment the high byte, then you're going to have problems. So I actually ended up creating a macro to handle that. So let me go ahead and create. I'm going to create a new file. I'm going to call it macros. I'm just going to go ahead and say I'm going to call it inc16 for a 16-bit increment. So all we have to do here is say inc adder bne skip carry inc adder +1 and then skip carry. So this macro came about after a comment that Ken Jennings made. I don't think it's the same Ken Jennings from Jeopardy fame, but he had mentioned the fact that all you have to use is increment and then check the 0 flag. And so this is a very, very simple way to do a 16-bit increment. Thanks, Ken, for the tip. I always appreciate your comments. Okay, so we now have an increment 16 here, so all I have to do is do that. Okay, so advance the screen pointer, but it should do it correctly now. So let's go ahead and try again. Okay, oh, I forgot to include the macros file. Not sure where to put it. I'll stick it at the end. Okay, let's try again. Why did I do that? That. And boom. Boom. Okay, our player is still in the wrong place, and that we'll fix that in a minute, but our playfield is shifted. Now, one of the things you'll notice here is it's not exactly in the same place, and we'll look at that just in a second. But it is moved over, and now we can set it up so that we'll have on the right-hand side of the screen, we'll have the UI, we'll be able to put a border on it, etc. But the main thing here is we're going to need to put in the border. To do that border, we're going to need to set up two lines on the top and bottom that use a different graphics mode. Okay, so we're going to do two different modes here. We're going to do Antic 4 and Antic 5. Antic 4 is going to be the top line and the bottom line, and Antic 5 will be everything else. Now, there's a good reason for doing this. One, the main reason we want to do this is the fact that we want to have an odd number for the playfield. The centering everything depends on having an odd number of things, okay? So having an 11 by 11 playfield means that we would have 13 by 13, or rather, if we're just looking at the vertical space, we would need 13 if we had a space on the top and the bottom. Well, we only have 12, okay? Well, Antic 4 just happens to be the exact half of Antic 5. So the cool thing is we can use two Antic 4 lines, which will make up one line of Antic 5, and then we get to 12 lines. So that's what we're gonna do next. So to do that, we're going to go in our display list file here. I'm going to go ahead and repurpose this because we're not using Antic Mode 2. We're not going to use it in the game at all. We are simply going to use Antic Mode 4 and Antic Mode 5. And our first line at the very top, we want that to be Antic Mode 4. So I'm just going to do this. I'm going to copy this line. And instead of Antic 5, we're going to do Antic Mode 4. Now, we're going to be wanting to use a different memory address for the top line. And the reason is we're going to use that top line to be able to tell the user that they've done something, like, you hit the monster or something happens, you pick up this, you pick up that. Basically, it's a status line. So I'm actually just going to call this status line. And I'll add that in just a minute. But we're going to have Antic Mode 4 with an LMS that says this is where this buffer is going to be. And then Antic 5, so we're going to actually want 11 Antic Mode 5s and 2 Antic Mode 4s. So we have 1, 2, 3, so let's see, there's 5 there, 10, and 11. So we want to make this last one Antic 4, okay? So let's go ahead and add this status line buffer. And I'm going to go ahead and put it right here. And the reason why is, I'm probably going to be moving all these memory addresses around. So I'm going to put this at 6400. And let's see what happens. Let's see if it assembles and runs. Okay. Not much different. Okay. You do notice that the player moved up though, which is kind of interesting. But we still also notice that we're off by 1 here. And that is because when I was doing this last time, we had an off by 1 error, and I fixed it just by doing a, put it in there and say, oh, just sub this, number here. And that was in our map offset function here. Let's go ahead and remove this. Don't need it. So now, we have the ladder in the center of our viewport, but our player is still not centered. The reason why is because the player missile graphics and the character set stuff, completely different systems. Player missile graphics, you can put on any graphics mode, you can do whatever you want. It's basically completely different systems, one layered on top of each other. So we need to do some adjustments on the player missile graphics. So in that, so all we have to do is go into here where we're doing the load PMG. Now, one of the things is we're doing a half height character set on the top. So we actually, each character here is 8 pixels high. So all we need to do is just remove or go down to 60 for each of those. And so what that'll do is that'll make it so that our player is on the right horizontal line. So we can see that. So he's there. Now we just need to move him over. Now, what we did is we use 120 as the middle here because it's a 240 wide pixels. I did some trial and error here and found out that it's 92. We'll put it right where he needs to be. So let's go ahead and try this. This is the moving it over the horizontal position, okay? I know we haven't talked about player missile graphics in a while, but if you remember, it's really easy to move left and right, not so much up and down. But left and right, all we have to do is just shift it over a little bit. So let's go ahead and run it, and boom. We are right on top of the stairs, and we're good to go. Let me see what happens when I move around. I can still move. But there's problems. Collision detection. I always love going into the memory locations here. It's like, whoa, it's like Tron or something. Get to see the man behind the curtain, so to speak. So what we're going to want to do here is we're going to want to revamp our collision detection stuff. And so remember, I removed that part from our blitz screen. So now I'm going to re-add it. I'm going to create a new procedure for that. So I'm going to call that procedure update player tiles. And so we're going to move map and map pointer. We need to actually move our map pointer to the actual location of the player. So what we're going to do is we're going to do an LDY player Y. We're going to shift down player Y times. So we're going to do decrement B&E loop. So really simple. We're just shifting down as many times, and player Y starts off at 16, so we're going to go through this loop 16 times. And now what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to add player X to it. Now the issue here is I can't do this. So ADW is add word, okay? Now the problem with this, and this took me a minute to figure out, is the deal is that it's expecting both sides here to be words. Okay, player X is not a word. It is a byte. And we have two ways of fixing this problem. We could either make player X and player Y 16-bit numbers, but there's no real need to, because we're never going to have more than 256 by 256 maps. So what we need to do is we need to have a function or a macro that will handle adding a 8-bit number to a 16-bit number. So I've actually have created a macro called ADWB. So macro ADWB. So that's going to be add byte to word. So we have source and value. LBA source, add val, and then store it back into source. And we're gonna look at what the, look at the carry flag from doing that. And if it's set, then we're gonna skip, or it's clear carry if it's not set, I should say. And we're going to increment the high byte. And we're going to do skip carry. So if the carry, if carry clear, then it's going to not do the carry to the high byte. That's all it is. Okay. And so now, where was I? I was here. So we're going to add the player X to the map pointer. So it'll shift over player X times. And as of right now, the map pointer is sitting on where the player is. So now we need to check to see to the left, to the right, where they're on, one up and one down. Okay, so we're gonna get, let's see, so get the tile the player is standing on, and we're gonna just do, we're gonna reset Y because we're gonna use this notation, comma y, and then we're going to store on tile. Okay, so far so good. Now we need to get to the one to the left. Okay, we're going to say get the tile to the left of the player. And we're going to do decrement map pointer Lodier, and we're going to store it left tile. Now, some of you might be screaming at the screen going, hey, isn't that a possible bug here because of we're doing a decrement, kind of like the increment? And yes, I actually was looking at this. I didn't run into the bug, but if you were standing on a particular spot, and it goes to get the left one from it, and it does just a subtraction, and you're right on that boundary, you're going to get the wrong value. And it may or may not matter, but we want to make sure that we don't have that problem. So I created yet another macro. I like macros, so I created one called Dec16. So when you use the sub, or SBW, or that's for word, when you do subtraction, it will use the carry flag to show that it needs to it needs to borrow. So there's no borrow flag, so it uses the carry flag. So what we're going to just do is Dec16 adder, LDA adder, B&E, I'm going to call it skip borrow, decrement adder +1, skip borrow, decrement adder. So the idea here is that if there's nothing to borrow, it just goes ahead and decrements the low byte. Otherwise, it's going to decrement the high byte and then decrement the low byte. So you have to borrow to go to the next one. So Dec16 is our function to be able to do it. So I'm going to go ahead and change this to Dec16. Now we want to get the one to the right. Okay, so get the tile to the right of the player. So we're going to do an Inc16 map pointer, Inc16 map pointer, so that it can move over to the right. I toyed with the idea of setting a temp variable for this, but I think, especially if there's no carrying and stuff, this is actually faster to do it this way. Definitely, I haven't analyzed the number of cycles it takes, but I'm pretty sure just incrementing twice is fine. We're going to do an LDA pointer Y, and then we're going to store the right tile. So we've gotten the one they're on, the one to the left, and the one to the right. Now we need to get the one above and the one below. So we're going to, since we're to the right of the player, we're going to need to get the one, we're going to need to go back to the center, get the tile above the player. We're going to decrement 16, and we're going to do a subtract word for the map pointer, and we're going to do map width. So it's going to move it one line up in the map, which is exactly what we want. And we're going to do an LDA map pointer. And we're going to store that in the up tile. Now, the last one is get the tile below player. We're going to do an add word. We're going to do map pointer. And then what we're going to do is we're going to do map width ×2. Okay. And I just realized, instead of doing increment twice, well, actually it'd be interesting. Which is better, adding 2 or incrementing twice? So that's actually kind of an interesting thought. I'm just going to leave it as increment twice. It's fine. So we're going to add map pointer, and then we're going to load map pointer Y, and then we're going to store the down tile. Okay, RTS and NP. So we now have a procedure that can be called every time we move. Okay, so every time the player moves, we want to be calling this update player tiles. And before they move, we also want to be calling it. So I'm actually going to put this up here. I'm going to say update player tiles, just to make sure we run that in the very beginning. Okay, and so now what we're going to need to do is in read joystick, we're going to need to do some updates in here because we're looking at the up tile, down tile and all that, and that's great. But one of the things that we wanted to do with the new character sets is not just have one tile as being the ones that you can't walk through. In fact, what we did is if you look at the dungeon character set, if you look, the player shouldn't really be walking through any of these tiles, okay? The ones that they should be walking through are down here. So we purposely oriented the character set so that we can do a simple comparison as opposed to saying, is it this tile, is it this tile, is it this tile, is it this tile? All of these tiles you can't walk through. These particular ones on the bottom, you can. And so what we need to do here is change our stuff to not just look to see if it's one, but this is the 55th character on here. So what we can do is we can say, we're gonna do a compare for 55, okay? And basically if you look at the compare function, if it uses the carry flag, okay? So if it's not 55 or greater, I believe it could be over 55, I have to look, but the idea here is that if it's not walkable, we go to done. Otherwise, we're gonna say, yes, it's walkable. Now we're gonna do a player Y, and then we're gonna run update player tiles because we've moved. And then we're gonna say jump done. Now, a couple things here. One, we don't have a delay in here. And I'll explain why in a minute, but the idea here is that we're gonna be going through and we're just gonna, instead of saying, is it this one particular tile, we're gonna say this whole group of tiles. If these are allowed, it's basically doing a whitelist versus a blacklist. So I'm gonna go ahead and remove that section and then go ahead and copy these on here and just change them because it's gonna be the same logic, okay? In this case, we're gonna do an increment. Some of you might be saying, wait, aren't you supposed to use the decrement 16 or the increment 16? No, because player X and player Y are 8-bit numbers, so we can do increment and decrement all day long. The only thing we'd have to worry about is if we got over 255, which we're not. We're never gonna do that. So I'm gonna go ahead and do this as well. And this is gonna be left tile. And instead of player Y, we're gonna do player X. And then we're gonna do right tile. And we're gonna say increment, or no, decrement, increment player X, okay. I'm gonna show you just to make sure that the collision detection works. Now it's gonna be really fast. So we're gonna hit the walls very fast, but that's okay. We know that the collision detection works. We just don't have delays in there. Okay, so it works. And let's go ahead and re-add the delays. Okay, so every time you move, we're gonna do delay. We had delay 5 in here before, I believe. And we're just gonna re-add them so that we can play the game. Next time, we're gonna rework the way we're doing the delays. It's gonna break in the future. So for now, we can use this. And we now have successfully moved the playfield over. It was a lot of work moving it over. Oh, notice we also have a collision detection on our fountain. So that's cool. So that's the way it's supposed to be. And if we had anything else to collide with, we wouldn't be able to walk through that either. So that's actually it for today. Just because this video is getting quite long and I have a lot more stuff I want to cover for this. But for now, I'm going to end it, and you guys will have to tune in next week to see when we start doing borders and the UI stuff, etc. So that being said, see you in the next adventure. Take care. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to hit the like button. If you'd like to see more of this kind of content, be sure to hit the subscribe button and ring the bell. I post new videos all the time and I wouldn't want you to miss any. If you'd like to see more of this series, be sure to click up here. And if you'd like to see something else, be sure to click up here.